You wake up when your body is ready. No alarm, no schedule, no place you need to be. You sit up, stretch, and ask yourself one question. What should I do today? For 99% of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical. This was every single morning for roughly 300,000 years. And the answer to that question looked nothing like the life you're living right now. Modern humans spend about 90,000 hours of their lives working. That's roughly 1/3 of your waking existence dedicated to a job. But for the overwhelming majority of human history, jobs didn't exist. There was no employment, no wages, no boss, no career ladder to climb. So what did people actually do all day? Let's start with what we know for certain. In 1963, archaeologist Richard Lee conducted a study that would change how we understand prehistoric life. He tracked the daily activities of the Dobeju Hwansi people in Botswana, one of the few remaining groups still living in a way that resembles pre-agricultural human life. He found that adults spent about 2.5 days per week acquiring food. That's roughly 17 hours. The rest of the time, they did whatever they wanted. And here's the important part. This pattern shows up everywhere anthropologists look. The Hadza in Tanzania, the ache in Paraguay, the Martu in Australia. Completely different environments, different continents. Same result, about 15 to 20 hours per week spent on survival activities. For context, you probably work twice that. Now, some of you are thinking, but those are modern people. How do we know ancient humans lived the same way? Fair question, and the answer comes from bones. When archaeologists compare skeletons of ancient humans to early agricultural populations, the difference is dramatic. Farmers were shorter. Their bones show signs of nutritional deficiency. Their teeth were riddled with cavities from grain-heavy diets. They had arthritis in their spines from repetitive labor, and they died younger. Ancient human skeletons, taller, stronger, healthier teeth, less joint damage. Their bones tell a clear story. They were doing less repetitive physical labor, not more. But the most fascinating evidence comes from something archaeologists found that shouldn't exist if survival was a constant struggle: art. In 1994, explorers discovered Chauvet Cave in southern France. Inside were paintings created roughly 30,000 years ago. Horses, lions, rhinoceroses, rendered with perspective, shading, and movement. These weren't crude stick figures. This was sophisticated art that required skill, planning, and most importantly, time. Someone spent hours, maybe days, deep inside a cave by firelight, painting animals on a wall. Not for survival, not for food, for beauty, for meaning, for something to do. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found 100,000-year-old perforated shell beads, tiny holes drilled through seashells, clearly meant to be strung together as jewelry. The nearest coastline was 20 kilometers away. Someone walked 40 kilometers round trip just to collect shells, then spent hours carefully drilling holes with stone tools, just to look good. In 2008, researchers found a 40,000-year-old flute carved from a vulture bone in Germany. 5 finger holes, perfectly spaced. Whoever made this understood music. They understood pitch, and they spent significant time crafting it. Not for hunting, not for defense, for music. These aren't isolated finds. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, archaeological sites from 100,000 years ago onward are filled with evidence of decorative objects, carefully crafted tools far more elaborate than necessary for survival, and items that required hours of focused work with no immediate practical benefit. This is what people did when they weren't securing food. They created. They decorated. They made things beautiful. So let's reconstruct a day. You wake up around dawn. The fire from last night is still smoldering. Someone adds wood. You eat leftover meat or fish from yesterday. Maybe some nuts or berries collected the day before. Breakfast is social. People talk. They plan loosely for the day. Not because they have to, because that's what humans do. Around mid-morning, a small group might leave to hunt or gather. But here's the key. You don't go every day. If the hunt was successful 2 days ago and food is stored, you might not leave camp at all. You might spend the morning working on tools, sharpening a spear, weaving a basket, scraping an animal hide to make it soft and usable. This isn't work in the modern sense. There's no clock, no supervisor. You do it because competence matters, because being skilled earns respect, because making things well is part of being human. If hunting happens, it's not the frantic chase you see in movies. Humans are persistence hunters. We track animals at a steady jog for hours until they overheat and collapse. We're the only species that can do this effectively because we can sweat and regulate our body temperature while running. Most animals can't. So we outlast them. The hunt might take 3 to 6 hours including travel. Then the animal is carried back and butchered. Everyone eats. And by early afternoon, the productive part of the day is essentially over. What happens next is what modern people find hardest to understand. Nothing and everything. People rest. They sit in the shade and talk. They play with children. They groom each other, picking through hair, reinforcing bonds. They make jewelry from shells or beads or animal teeth. They carve designs into bones or stones. They nap. Anthropologist James Sussman documented that among the Ju Hwansi, adults spend roughly 6 hours per day in what he called social time. Not working, not sleeping, just being with other people, talking, laughing, telling jokes, because in a world without money or police or written contracts, your survival depends entirely on your relationships. If people don't like you, they don't have to share food when you're hungry. So you invest enormous amounts of time in those bonds. Not because it's productive, because it's how humans stay human. Then the sun sets, and this is when something remarkable happens. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner analyzed hundreds of hours of conversation recordings from the Zhu Huanzi. During the day, conversations were practical: who saw animal tracks where, which plants were ready for harvest, complaints about someone not sharing fairly. But at night, around the fire, 81% of conversations shifted to stories. Myths about how the world began, tales of ancestors who did impossible things, jokes that made everyone laugh, adventures from far away. Wiesner argued that this is where human culture was actually born. Gods, spirits, the past, the future. Things you can only think about when your stomach is full and you're safe. And people didn't go to sleep and stay asleep the way you do now. Historical records from medieval Europe and sleep studies from the 1990s confirm that before artificial light, humans slept in two phases. First sleep for about 4 hours, then a wakeful period of 1 to 2 hours in complete darkness, then second sleep for another 4 hours. So here's what a full day looked like. About 4 to 6 hours securing food or making tools. About 6 hours in social interaction, storytelling, grooming, playing. About 8 hours sleeping in 2 separate phases, and the rest resting, sitting, watching clouds, doing nothing in particular. Existing without needing to justify your existence through productivity. Then, about 10,000 years ago, something changed. Humans in the Fertile Crescent began planting seeds and domesticating animals. Agriculture. And agriculture is a trap. Once you start farming, you can feed more people. More people means you need more food. More food means more farming. Within a few generations, populations exploded and there was no going back. Because now there were too many mouths to survive by hunting and gathering. You were locked in. And farming required far more labor. Plowing, planting, weeding, harvesting, storing, defending crops from animals and raiders. The skeletal evidence is unambiguous. Early farmers worked harder, ate worse, and died younger than the hunter-gatherers who came before them. But the population kept growing, and with larger populations came specialists. Toolmakers, potters, weavers, inventors, then soldiers, priests, administrators, and eventually jobs. Employment. The idea that your time belonged to someone else in exchange for resources. By the time we built cities, the original human lifestyle was gone, replaced by schedules, obligations, the need to work most of your waking hours just to survive in the system we created. Today, you spend 90,000 hours working. Your ancestors spent way less. You sleep in one block and call waking up at 2 a.m. insomnia. They slept in 2 phases and used the middle hours for reflection. You spend your life chasing an illusion of greatness, achievements, wealth, and success by standards society invented. They woke up every morning already free, already enough, and at peace with nothing to prove to anyone. They didn't need to become successful. They were already living the life you're working your entire existence to retire into. You make art if you can find time after your job. They made art because they had time, and that's what humans do. We're not a different species, but we live so differently from how humans lived for 99% of our existence that we might as well be. We traded freedom for food security, leisure for population growth, time for productivity, and most of us have no idea what we gave up, because we never knew it was there.